Those days, I lived like a soul adrift in a vast, dark sea, exhausted, weary, and almost without the will to go on. My job was gone, relationships had fallen apart, and loneliness consumed me. Each morning I woke up, I wondered why I was still here. Each night I went to bed, I wished I wouldn't open my eyes the next day. That night was no different from any other, except my body was more fatigued than usual. I hadn't eaten properly all day, just a few sips of water, and tried to sleep to escape all my thoughts. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, and eventually fell asleep without realizing it. In that sleep, I saw myself standing in a pitch-black void. There was no path, no direction, just a thick, enveloping darkness. I felt so lost and insignificant that I almost vanished into the dark. My heart pounded. My breathing was rapid. I knew I was dreaming, but the feeling was terrifyingly real. Then suddenly, a brilliant light appeared in the distance. This light wasn't harsh like the sun, nor cold like an electric lamp. It was warm, gentle, yet bright enough to tear through the night. I stood still, not daring to move forward, but the light slowly came closer, enveloping me. Amidst that light, I saw the figure of a person. I couldn't make out the face, but I knew, in a strange and certain way, that this person was looking directly at me. Without an introduction, without a question, the person gently spoke. My name, I am here. That voice pierced through every cold wall in my heart. It was warm, peaceful, and most of all, it made me want to cry. I had never heard a voice like that in my life. It didn't sound like anyone I had ever met, yet it made me feel known, called by my right name, as if the person had known me since forever. I wanted to say something, but my throat was choked. In that moment, all my fears seemed to vanish. I just stood there, feeling the warmth of the light embracing me, like the hug of a father I had lost long ago. Just as I was about to take a step closer, the dream began to fade. The light receded, and the person's figure slowly disappeared into the void. I tried to call out, but no sound escaped my lips. I woke up with a start. My room was pitch black, with only the hum of the fan. Everything around me was the same, but my pillow was soaked with tears. I didn't know when I had started crying. I only knew that for the first time in months, my heart felt something other than despair. A warm, fragile spark, so real that I couldn't bear to forget it. I lay still for a long time, listening to my own heartbeat. The voice echoed in my mind. My name, I am here. I didn't understand what it meant. I only knew that from that moment on, deep down, I felt that something, or rather someone, was looking for me. In the days following that dream, I thought I would feel lighter. But no, the warm feeling from the light and the voice only lasted for a brief moment, while reality still weighed heavily like a rock. I woke up, looked around the empty room, and everything was just as it had been, messy, cold, and terrifyingly silent. The job I had once been so passionate about was gone a few months ago. The official reason was personnel restructuring, but I knew deep down it reflected my own burnout. I had lost all motivation, creativity, and every morning was a battle to get out of bed. And my family, we used to be a close-knit home. But after a series of setbacks, the distance grew. Every conversation was just small talk, or worse, full of blame. I had nowhere to unburden my heart, and I didn't want anyone to see my weakness. Friends, when joy left me, they gradually drifted away too. Some were busy with their own lives, some didn't know what to say in the face of my sadness, and a few just disappeared. In the evenings, I would sit and stare at my phone screen, a long list of contacts, but no one to call. There were days I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and asking myself, how much longer do I have to live like this? I had no answer. I only knew that each passing day was as heavy as dragging a boulder on my shoulders. That strange dream still haunted me. I remembered the light, the voice, but when I thought about it, a part of me would scoff. It's just a dream. Don't be delusional. I wasn't a superstitious person, nor had I ever believed in miracles. And if God truly existed, why would he let me fall into this situation? Those questions swirled in my mind, like knives twisting in an unhealed wound. Slowly, I began to doubt not just the dream, but the meaning of my own life. Every time night fell, I felt like the whole world was against me. That evening, I struggled to sleep again. I opened the window and looked out at the pitch-black void. The city was still lit up, but in my heart was a sky without moon or stars. I wondered if one day I were to disappear, would anyone even notice? That night, I slept from pure exhaustion, not hoping for a dream and not hoping for dawn. I just wanted everything to stop. I didn't think that dream would come back. In fact, I wasn't even hoping for it. Lately, my mind had been as heavy as a stone, with no room for fragile hopes. But then, on what seemed like an ordinary night, it happened again. I found myself in the dark again. But this time, the darkness wasn't as dense as before. It seemed to have thinned out. I could see a faint blur in the distance, and then the light appeared. This light was not only brighter than the last time, but it also spread faster and more powerfully, like a white wave crashing through the night. I wasn't prepared. I just stood there, letting the light swallow every dark corner around me. In the midst of the light, the person appeared again. It was the same figure, the same peace radiating from every movement. But this time, I saw more clearly. The eyes, deep, warm, as if they held an entire starry sky. The person held out a hand. Not in a rush, not in a demanding way, just a hand extended, waiting. I looked at that hand for a long time, and I realized I was trembling. I looked at that hand for a long time, and I realized I was trembling. Trembling from fear, but also trembling from a desire I couldn't name. The voice spoke, clearer this time, as if it was reaching directly into my heart. I am here. 3 simple words, but they silenced every other sound in the dream. I felt as if every muscle in my body stopped to listen. I am here. Not I will come, not I was here, but I am here right now. I wanted to ask, who are you? But before the words could escape, everything began to fade. The light dimmed, the hand moved away, and the darkness returned. I woke up with a jolt, my back drenched in sweat. But this time, my heart was beating not from fear, but from something very different, an urge. I sat up, holding my head, trying to analyze it. Maybe this was just my mind creating something to comfort itself. But if so, why did the voice in the eyes feel so real that I could still feel them? I couldn't find the answer. But in my heart, a thought began to grow. If this isn't an illusion, then it might be a message. And if it's a message, I need to know who sent it. The next morning, I woke up feeling half confused, half curious. 2 dreams in a row with the same person, the same light, the same words. It couldn't just be a coincidence. A part of me began to feel a pull to find an answer. I remembered my grandmother's old Bible, which had sat on the bookshelf in the living room for years, so dusty that I had once thought of it as just a souvenir. When she was alive, she would often sit by the window in the morning, reading those pages with a look of strange peace. Back then, I didn't care, but today, for some reason, I wanted to touch it. I took the book down. The leather cover was worn, the pages were yellowed, and some pages had notes written in my grandmother's slanted handwriting. I opened it at random, not looking for any specific passage. The first words that caught my eye were, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Isaiah 41:10. I froze. I am with you. Wasn't that exactly what the person in the dream had told me? The words pierced through the fresh memory of the night before. I sat in silence for minutes, my heart beating faster than usual. I flipped a few more pages. My eyes stopped at the verse. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." Isaiah 43:2. This time I couldn't hold back, and tears welled up again. I remembered my first dream, standing in the darkness, and in the second dream, that hand reaching out, as if to pull me from danger. Everything suddenly fit together in a strange way, as if someone was piecing together a larger picture. I didn't dare to jump to conclusions, but my heart began to stir. Could it be that God was trying to speak to me? That night, I placed the Bible next to my bed. For the first time in months, I felt I had a reason to look forward to the night, not to escape, but to hope. In the days after I started reading the Bible, I thought everything would get easier, that I would find peace and my faith would grow day by day. But the reality was the opposite. Every time I felt I was getting closer to an answer, the darkness in my heart would rise up more powerfully, like an unexpected wave crashing ashore. Old memories, mistakes, and the words people had said that made me feel worthless. It all came flooding back, drowning me. I remembered the times I had hurt others, the wrong decisions that had caused everything to fall apart. I thought about the moments of weakness I had promised myself I would never repeat, but still fell. It was all like a slow-motion film, replaying in my mind. There were nights I couldn't stop crying. The tears soaked my pillow, but not because I missed the dream, but because I felt I didn't deserve for that dream to be real. I began to ask myself, why would God choose to appear to me? I'm not a good person. I have nothing to offer him. I didn't even truly believe he existed before. Every time that feeling came, I wanted to close the Bible and give up on everything. A small voice inside me whispered, "You're just comforting yourself. Stop being delusional." And I hated that sometimes. I believed that voice more than the promises of peace I had just read. Yet even in the most intense conflict, there was one thing I couldn't deny. The image of that hand and the voice saying, "I am here," were still deeply etched in my memory, impossible to erase. No matter how hard I tried to forget, they would come back, especially in my moments of greatest exhaustion. I didn't know if it was a coincidence, my subconscious, or if it was truly God looking for me. But I knew I was in the middle of a battle not with the outside world, but with my own inner self. That night, I couldn't sleep. Outside, it was pouring rain, and the wind howled through the window as if to tear the night apart. I tossed and turned for a long time, until exhaustion finally pulled me into sleep. When I opened my eyes in the dream, I found myself on a deserted beach. The sky was pitch black, clouds were swirling, and giant waves were crashing against the shore. The wind was so strong, I could barely stand. Rain lashed my face, cold and stinging. I looked around and saw no one. There was only the sound of the waves, the thunder, and the darkness surrounding me. Fear welled up in my chest, like the feeling of knowing you're about to be swallowed by the sea. I tried to back away, but the water had already reached my feet. Then amidst the howling wind and roaring thunder, I saw a light appear. Not from the sky, but right next to me. And the person I had met in the 2 previous dreams, was standing there. The person was not wet, nor was he swayed by the storm. He had the same eyes, deep and peaceful. He stepped closer and placed a hand on my shoulder. That hand was so warm that I almost forgot I was in the middle of a storm. He looked directly into my eyes and said, "Do not be afraid." Just 2 words, but it seemed as if the entire sea and sky went silent. The wind softened, the waves seemed to slow down, and I felt my feet become more steady on the sand. The fear that had just overwhelmed me vanished, giving way to a strange sense of peace. I wanted to ask, "Why are you here with me?" But before the question could escape, the light around the person began to fade. The hand left my shoulder, and everything was swallowed by the darkness. I woke up with a start. The rain outside was still pouring, but my heart was beating slower, no longer in a panic. I lay still for a long time, then whispered, "You really are looking for me, aren't you?" There was no audible answer, but in my heart, the certainty was greater than ever. No matter how big the storm, I no longer had to stand alone. I had never been a praying person. In my memory, praying was only for very devout people, or for kids before meals and foreign movies. My life was governed by logic and personal effort. There was no room for whispering to an invisible being. But after the 3rd time I met the person in my dream, something in me changed. I began to think, if that person really was God, if he was looking for me, then I couldn't just remain silent. That evening, when everything was quiet, I sat on my bed, turned off the lights, and tried to talk to him. At first, I was awkwardly fumbling. I didn't know how to start, or if I needed to use any proper phrases. In the end, I just whispered, "I don't know what to call you, but if you are the person I met in my dreams, can you hear me? I'm not good at talking. I'm just so tired, and I'm afraid." After I said that, I was silent, listening. There was no thunder, no brilliant light, just the sound of my own heartbeat and my breathing slowing down. But in that silence, a strange peace began to spread through my body, just like the feeling when his hand rested on my shoulder in the storm. In the days that followed, I continued to pray, still clumsy, still hesitant, sometimes not knowing what to say besides, "I'm here," or "I need you." But every time, when I finished, my heart felt a little lighter. Slowly, I realized that prayer wasn't a rigid ritual, but a conversation. I didn't need to use flowery words. I didn't need to be worthy to speak. I just needed to be honest. I still wasn't sure I fully understood God, but I knew one thing. In prayer, I no longer felt alone, and that for me at that moment was a miracle. I used to think that if God existed, he would perform grand miracles, healing terminal illnesses, calming stormy seas, or making the sky glow brightly like in movies. But after those days of starting to pray, I realized there are miracles that are not loud or dramatic, but they come at exactly the right time, so much so that they can't be considered a coincidence. That day, I had a terrible morning. I still hadn't heard back about a job I had applied for, and my savings were running low. I sat alone on a chair, looking out the window, and the thought of giving up crept into my mind again. I thought about retreating from everything, disappearing from everyone. Just as that thought formed, my phone rang. It was the number of an old friend I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years. I answered, and the first thing she said was, "For some reason, I was thinking of you this morning, so I called. Are you okay?" Just a simple question, but I felt like I was pulled back from the edge of a cliff. A few days later, while mindlessly scrolling through social media, an image appeared on my screen, a Bible verse set against a bright sky after the rain. It read, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Hebrews 13:5. I stopped for a long time. My heart slowed and my eyes welled up. That was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment, as if someone knew I was struggling and sent that message directly to me. Then another afternoon, as I was crossing a crowded street, I caught the eye of a stranger. We just passed each other, but he smiled kindly. For some reason, that smile warmed my heart, as if it carried a silent message. You are not invisible. Someone sees you. One by one, small, ordinary things that others might call coincidences, but when put together, they formed a meaningful picture. I began to believe that God was not just present in my dreams, but he was also stepping into every ordinary moment of my life. And I understood that some miracles don't change the whole world, but they are enough to change a heart. I had lived most of my life believing that love had to be earned through effort. If you wanted someone to stay, you had to be good enough. If you wanted to be accepted, you had to hide the ugliest parts of yourself. And if you failed, they would leave, as had happened to me. But the dreams, the clumsy prayers, and the small miracles of late were gradually breaking down that old belief. I began to realize one thing. He never asked me to be perfect to come near. In the dream, he called my name when I was standing in darkness. In the storm, he placed his hand on my shoulder, even though I had nothing to give in return. And in real life, he sent comfort through friends, through the Bible, and even through a stranger's fleeting smile. I remember one evening when I was rereading the verse, "But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Romans 5:8. I stopped for a long time. While we were still sinners, it meant that even before I had a chance to do anything good, he had already chosen to love me. I didn't have to race to earn that love, because it had been given to me in advance. That thought made me both relieved and confused. All my life, I was used to love coming and going based on conditions. But now I was facing a love that didn't depend on whether I was worthy or not. I'm not saying that from that moment on, I believed completely. There were still days I doubted, still times when the darkness wanted to pull me back. But there was one major difference. I knew I wasn't abandoned. I knew that even in my worst moments, he was still there, not turning his back, not leaving. And for the first time in a very long time, I began to believe that I was truly loved. I used to think that the best way to move on was to forget the past. I tried to bury the memories that made my heart ache, hurtful words, betrayals, and moments of feeling abandoned when I needed someone the most. I closed the door to my memories, locked it tight, and told myself, that's over. But the truth is, the past never really sleeps. It still crept into my present, through nightmares, through overreactions to small things, through my hesitation when someone wanted to get close. When I started to seek God, I realized that he didn't want me to bury those wounds. He wanted me to bring them into the light, not for him to judge, but for him to touch and heal. One evening during prayer, I imagined myself standing before a large table. On the table were broken pieces, each piece a painful memory. I trembled as I placed each piece on the table, afraid that he would look at me with reproach. But instead, I saw him gently gathering each piece, his hand radiating a warm light. He didn't erase the memories, but he took away their sting. The wound was still there, but it no longer bled. This process wasn't easy. There were days I was tired of having to remember things I wanted to forget. There were nights I begged him not to make me face it again, but he was patient, step by step, teaching me that only when I surrendered my pain completely could I truly be free. And then, in the midst of that healing journey, I realized the wounds that had once been the place where I fell were now the place where I felt God's gentleness most clearly. I was always a reserved person, especially after old hurts. In crowds, I would often retreat, sit in a corner, and listen rather than talk. But then a sister from church invited me to join a small group on Friday evenings. At first, I intended to decline, partly out of shyness, partly from fear of being asked questions I couldn't answer. That evening, I stepped into a warm room, filled with the sound of laughter and chatter. The smell of hot tea and cookies filled the air. I sat at the end of the table, silently listening to everyone share. Then someone started to tell a story about a time he had a dream of a light and heard God's voice. My heart pounded. His story was like a reflection of my own dream. Then someone else told of a time God came to them in a night of despair. I was surprised to realize I wasn't alone at all. Every story was like a puzzle piece fitting into a larger picture of God's love. I saw their eyes light up when they spoke of him, not the light of someone who had never known pain, but the light of someone who had walked through the dark night and been let out. When it was my turn, I was still trembling. My voice was small, hesitant, but I told them about my first dream, and then the second. I saw some people nodding gently, a few eyes welling up with tears. One person took my hand and said, "God has touched your life, and he will lead you even further." I left the group that evening with a lighter heart, not because all my problems were solved, but because I knew I no longer had to walk alone. I had stepped out of my shell and realized that outside there wasn't just a cold wind, but the embrace of people who shared my faith. That night, I had another dream. It was the same light, the same figure, but this time it was different. There was no longer a vast distance between me and the person. It was just a single step away. I found myself standing in a wide open field, with a gentle breeze and the scent of ripe rice in the air. The person walked toward me, his eyes full of grace. He smiled, placed his warm hand on my shoulder, and said slowly, word for word, "Go and tell what you have seen." That voice echoed, not just in the dream, but it seemed to pierce my very soul. I wanted to ask, who should I tell? Where do I even begin? But my lips couldn't form the words because the light suddenly grew brighter, embracing me completely. I woke up with a start. My heart was pounding as if I had just run a long distance. Everything in the room was silent, but my heart was on fire. I couldn't lie still. I sat up, grabbed a notebook, and wrote down every word and every image from the dream. The urge was so strong, it wasn't a sudden idea or a fleeting emotion, but a command, a calling. I knew I couldn't keep this story to myself anymore. I remembered the months before, when I was lost in darkness, desperate, and empty. If someone had told me then that God truly saw me and called my name, I might not have been so lonely. And now I understood. There are people out there who also need to hear that. I closed my eyes and prayed, Lord, I am weak and clumsy, but if you want me to, I will obey. Please lead me to where I need to go, to the people I need to meet, and to say the words you want me to say. That night I went back to sleep, filled with a deep peace. The dream was not just an event, it had become a mission, opening up a new journey. I didn't expect the opportunity to come so quickly. Just a few days after the fourth dream, I received a message from Min, an old friend I hadn't talked to in years. His voice on the phone was hoarse. Are you free? I need to talk to someone. We met at a small cafe. As soon as he sat down, Min bowed his head, his hands clasped tightly. He told me about the past few months, losing his job, his family falling apart, and feeling like he had no reason to live. Every word he said reminded me of my own past. My heart ached. In that moment, I knew this was the time to speak. I took a deep breath and began to tell my story. I told him about the nights I was exhausted and desperate, about the first dream, the light and the voice, about how I found his words in the Bible, about the small miracles and especially the fourth dream. When he said, "Go and tell what you have seen," Min listened in silence as I spoke, his eyes red and tear-filled. When I finished, he said shakily, "I had asked God for a sign. Last night I said to him, if you are truly there, please send someone to me. And today you called me." Our tears fell, but they were no longer tears of despair, but of relief knowing we were heard and loved. On the way home, I looked up at the sky, my heart overflowing with gratitude. The mission from the dream had become a reality, not on a grand stage, but at a small cafe table where two souls found new hope. After sharing my testimony with Min, I realized the dreams didn't come as often as before. At first, I felt a little lost, like a child used to hearing their mother's voice every night, who suddenly has to learn to sleep in silence. But then I realized he never left. He was no longer the brilliant light in the night, but the gentle light streaming through the window in the morning. He was no longer a resounding voice, but the Bible verse that opened to the exact passage I needed. He was no longer a hand on my shoulder in a dream, but the hug from a friend when I was weak. I began to feel his presence in every small moment. In the chirping of birds at dawn, I saw him reminding me of new life every day. In the sudden rain shower, I felt him washing away all my worries. In the quiet evenings, I felt him listening to my whispered prayers. In both silence and in storm, I knew he was there. Not because I always felt his presence clearly, but because I had faith in his promise, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Now I no longer live to seek a dream, but to walk alongside him in every step. The dream opened the door to faith, but it is his quiet and constant presence that keeps me moving forward every day. Looking back, I realize it all began on a night that seemed hopeless. A dream, seemingly fleeting, but it became the turning point that changed my entire life. At first, I thought it was just the imagination of an exhausted soul, but the more I lived and walked this journey of faith, the more I understood. That dream was not just a dream. It was God's way of opening a door, stepping into my world, and leading me out of the deep pit of despair. Now I no longer live to look for a special sign. I live to love, to bear witness, and to spread the hope I have received. I know that every breath, every new day is a gift from him, and I wait, not in fear or uncertainty, but in joyful certainty, for the day when I will meet him, no longer through the mist of a dream, but with my own eyes in eternity. I have met him. Whether in a dream or awake, he is the one who has redeemed me and loved me to the very end. My story concludes, but my journey with him continues. From a person lost in darkness, I have been found, lifted up, and led by him. The dream was just the beginning. The rest is a new life, where every day I get to walk in the presence of the one who loved me before I ever knew him. If you are also in your dark night today, know that he is still looking for you. Whether you see him or not, he is there, with his arms open, waiting for you to come home. If this story touches you, take a moment to pray, and open your heart to Jesus. He loves you, He understands you, and He wants to give you a new life. Please subscribe to the channel Tieng Goi Tieng Liang to hear more stories of faith and share this video with someone who needs hope. Who knows, my life used to be peaceful. Every morning I would wake up to the sound of birds singing outside my window and the aroma of coffee filling the small kitchen. A stable job, a loving family, and joyful friends. All of it made me believe I was living in a safe haven that nothing could touch. Then one afternoon that seemed just like any other, the storm began to roll in. A phone call, a short sentence from the hospital, brought everything crashing down. Your test results are not good. I heard every word clearly, but it felt like my ears were ringing and every sound around me suddenly disappeared. I remember that moment vividly. My hand was shaking so much I couldn't hold the phone. My heart was racing and my mind was blank. Just a few hours before, I was laughing with my colleagues. Now all my plans and future dreams felt like they had been torn to shreds by an invisible hand. In the days that followed, my life was covered by a thick fog. The illness didn't just attack my body, it invaded my mind. I started to dread the mornings because the sunlight no longer brought hope, but only reminded me that I was getting closer to an end. My family and friends tried to comfort me, but I knew they were also at a loss. Their worried eyes made me feel even more like a burden. There were nights when I lay awake for hours asking myself, why me? Why did God let this happen? I had never thought much about faith before. To me, God was just a distant concept, a story someone told in a church. But now, as every anchor disappeared, a question began to stir in my heart that I didn't dare to face. If He truly exists, does He see me right now? The storms of life often come unexpectedly without warning, and when they hit, we realize how small and fragile we are. I didn't know where this storm would take me, or if I would survive it. But deep down, a tiny part of me still hoped that somewhere in the darkness and howling wind, there would be a ray of light for me. The stark white hospital room, with its strong smell of antiseptic, gradually became my world. The days before, I was busy with work, family, appointments, but now everything was confined within 4 cold walls and the steady beeping of machines. My body weakened rapidly. The pain came suddenly, violently like waves crashing onto the shore, washing away my strength and my hope. Every morning I opened my eyes, I wondered how many days I had left to live. Fear crept into every breath, and darkness seemed to be devouring my mind. Night was the worst time, with no more footsteps of nurses or hushed conversations of loved ones. I lay there listening to my heart pounding and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor as a reminder that life was hanging by a thin thread. In those moments, I felt utterly small and helpless. I started to lose my sense of time. Day and night passed the same way, the only difference being the light seeping through the window cracks. The gaze of visitors also changed. They smiled, but their eyes were filled with worry and pity. That made me feel even more isolated. I used to think I was strong, but those days showed me how fragile human strength is. With no goals to strive for, no future plans, I felt like I was drifting aimlessly on a vast dark sea with no shore in sight. If anything was still holding me back, it was only a thin thread of hope. But even that thread I felt was slowly slipping from my grasp. As night fell, the room became so silent I could hear every beat of my heart. The darkness covered not just the outside, but also crept into my soul. Before, night was a time for rest, but now it was a heavy, suffocating space where dark thoughts found their way in. I lay there looking at the ceiling, feeling like someone slowly falling into a bottomless abyss. With every passing minute, the voice in my head became clearer. It's all over. What's the point of trying? No one understands and no one can save you. At first, I tried to push it away, but the more I resisted, the stronger it became, seeping in like water dripping into a dry well. I remember the days before the illness hit, the mornings full of energy, the joyful conversations, the plans for the future. Now they all seem like old, faded photographs, forgotten in a dusty box. I didn't just lose my health, I lost my purpose in life. Then one night, that voice became colder and more specific. If you're too tired, just let go. Just end it, and all the pain will stop. I burst into tears, but I didn't know if I was crying out of fear or because I was being carried away by that thought. The crying wasn't loud, just choked sobs, enough for me to feel that I was truly standing on the edge of a cliff. In that moment, I wished for a hand to hold mine, to pull me out of the darkness, but the room remained silent, with only the sound of the wind outside and my own broken breaths. I didn't know how long I could fight before that voice completely took over. I didn't know that from that night, another journey was beginning, a journey to find the light, even though I hadn't realized it yet. That night, I left the hospital with a heavy heart. A light rain was falling. The cold drops seemed to seep into my bones, making the sadness in my heart even thicker. I sat hunched on a stone bench near the hospital gate, not knowing where to go, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. Suddenly, a middle-aged woman stopped in front of me. She wore an old coat, her hair was drenched in the rain, but her eyes were unusually bright. She held out a small piece of paper to me and said softly, "You need this." I took it, looking blankly as her figure disappeared into the rain. The paper was a little smudged with water, but I could still read the italicized words. "I have called you by your name. You are mine." Isaiah 43:1-1. I don't know why that Bible verse shook my heart so much. It was as if someone, from very far but also very close, was calling me. Not by the name on my papers, but by the true name deep within my soul. I didn't sleep all that night. The words kept echoing, reminding me that even if the world turned its back on me, there was a being who knew exactly who I was. And for the first time in months, I felt that I wasn't completely lost in the darkness. I hadn't believed yet, hadn't fully understood, but I knew this might be the first ray of light. That evening, I sat in my small room, the yellow light casting shadows on the stained walls. Outside, the rain was still pattering, but the sound of the rain couldn't drown out the emptiness inside me. I remembered the Bible verse that the stranger had given me, a simple sentence that made my heart tremble. It was as if an invisible hand was gently knocking on the door of my heart. I had never truly prayed before. To me, prayer was just a strange ritual, something for other people, not for someone who had lost all hope like me. But that night, for some reason, I whispered, "God, if you are real, please help me." I don't know what to say, but I'm so tired. My voice was trembling, out of rhythm, and every word that came out felt heavy. I don't know how long I kept my eyes closed. I just felt a vague warmth spreading across my chest. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but it was a small spark, like a flickering candle in a dark room. The next day, I still had to face the harsh reality. The illness didn't disappear, the worries weren't resolved, but something else began to exist in my heart, a thought that maybe I wasn't completely alone. Every night, I tried to say a few more words to God, clumsy and broken. Some days I just cried. Some days I couldn't say anything but a sigh. But I kept going. Slowly, I realized that prayer wasn't about reciting beautiful words, but about truly opening my heart. And in the loneliest nights, I began to feel that someone was listening, patiently, gently, and never abandoning me. After that clumsy prayer, I didn't expect anything special to happen. To be honest, I wasn't even sure if God had heard me. But then, in the days that followed, coincidences kept happening. So much so that I began to wonder, is this really a coincidence? The next morning, when I was shuffling out to buy some food, an elderly woman stopped in front of me, smiled and said, "My child, don't be afraid. God loves you." I was stunned. I had never met her, never spoken to her, and I had no idea how she knew I was so afraid, worried, and lost. Her words were like an arrow piercing straight into my heart, gentle but profound, making me feel a strange warmth spread through my chest. A few days later, as I was waiting for the bus, a small piece of paper was blown to my feet by the wind. I picked it up and saw that it was a leaflet with a Bible verse. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Hebrews 13:5. I had never read the Bible, but those words kept echoing in my head all day, as if someone was whispering to me, "I am still here." Then one evening, as I was mindlessly scrolling through social media, a video appeared in my feed. The person in the video was sharing about being healed by God from a terminal illness. I hadn't actively searched for it, but that story reached the darkest corners of my being, where despair had long resided. I started to notice a common thread. Every time I hit rock bottom, every time the thought of giving up became the strongest, something would happen to pull me back. A sentence, a Bible verse, a smile from a stranger. None of these things solved my problem immediately, but each one lit a small spark in the thick darkness. I still didn't dare to fully believe that this was God. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was my mind wanting to cling to something so I wouldn't collapse. But deep down, I felt a presence, gentle but certain, that was following my every step. And I began to ask myself, if this really is God, what does He want me to do next? After the strange signs, I began to realize a profound truth that I had never understood before. True strength is not being able to control everything, but knowing how to let go and trust. My body was still weak. The pain hadn't completely disappeared, but my soul was slowly being healed in a different way. Every day I learned to place all my worries and fears into His hands, the only one who would never abandon me. I remember the long nights of being awake, where every second was an endless internal battle. But instead of fighting alone, I began to pray with the utmost sincerity, not to ask for an immediate miracle, but to ask for the strength to accept and move forward. In my weakness, I found a strange strength, the strength of faith and peace. I no longer ran from reality, no longer felt doubt and anger. Instead, I learned to relax, to surrender myself completely to Him, knowing that no matter the outcome, I would still be held in that loving embrace. I realized that it was in my weakest moments that God's power was most clearly revealed. The Bible verses I read gradually came alive. The promises in the Holy Scriptures were no longer dry words, but became a reality I experienced daily. I started to keep a prayer journal, writing down every moment I felt His presence, every time I found peace amidst the storms. I saw that I was no longer alone on this journey, but had someone always by my side, guiding and supporting my every step. That day, I walked into the clinic with an unusually calm state of mind. There was no longer the confusion and anxiety mixed in like before, only a deep peace in my heart. I told myself that no matter the result, I had been changed, given the strength to face it. The doctor held my file, looking back and forth at the newly updated test results. A look of something, maybe surprise, even confusion, flashed in his eyes. He cleared his throat and said slowly, "There are no more signs of the illness. I can't explain this. We have seen cases of recovery, but your case is so special that medicine can't account for it." The doctor's words made my heart beat faster, not from panic, but from an overflowing joy. I knew this was not a random result of medication or luck. This was the grace of God, the one who had heard my prayers, who had touched my body and my soul. I silently thanked Him for not only healing my illness, but also giving me an undying faith. My life from here on out would never be the same. I would not just live to exist, but to prove that miracles still happen, that there is still light in the thickest darkness. That day, I was not only medically confirmed of my recovery, but my heart also affirmed an undeniable truth. God had healed me. The day I received the miraculous results, my heart was filled with so many emotions. But it wasn't just joy, it was a sense of liberation I had never experienced before. I remember that moment clearly, sitting alone in my small room, tears streaming down my face. But this time they were tears of freedom. I wasn't crying because of pain or fear, but because I realized I was forgiven. Forgiven for my mistakes, for my doubts, for the months I had been submerged in despair. For the first time in my life, I felt God's unconditional love, like a refreshing stream washing away every deep wound in my soul. During the years I lived in darkness, I thought I would never be able to get out. But now I felt light, freed from the chains of guilt and despair. That wasn't my own strength, it was His grace, a love that needed no conditions, no merit or achievement, simply love. I remembered the Bible verse, He took our infirmities and bore our diseases, Isaiah 53:4. Those words were no longer just words on a page, but a living word, a reality I was experiencing in every moment of this new life. My tears that day were a sign of a profound transformation. from a slave to pain and sin, to a free child of light and love. I knew that I was not only healed physically, but my soul was also healed. From that moment on, I lived every day with deep gratitude and unwavering faith in God's love, the love that made me come alive again, not just physically, but in my soul. There's a moment in life when you know for sure that nothing will ever be the same again. For me, that moment came gently but intensely, like a brilliant light piercing through the thick, dark clouds that had long covered my soul. I remember that night clearly, the quiet space, the soft yellow light in the corner of the room. I knelt down, not out of despair or to beg for another miracle, but because my heart was overflowing with gratitude and a profound realization. In my heart, a miraculous power rose up, a light that came not from any physical source, but from deep within. That light was not just peace, but a complete awakening. I felt clearly that I was loved completely, accepted despite all my mistakes and flaws. All the fears, doubts, and burdens in me were lifted layer by layer, giving way to a new faith and hope. It was the first time I truly saw God, not through an image or words, but through His living presence in my soul. That light was like a guiding lamp, illuminating every hidden corner of my life and transforming my entire being. From that moment on, I no longer looked at life with eyes of fear. Instead, I walked with a new perspective, the perspective of someone who had been reborn, given the strength to love, forgive, and live every moment to the fullest. That light is proof that no matter how dark life gets, there is always hope. And that hope is the greatest gift I have ever received. After seeing God's light, my life turned a new page. Not because everything became perfect, but because I learned how to live each day in His grace. Before, I often felt the burden of responsibility and perfection, always trying to control everything and fight difficulties on my own. But now I realize that it's in my weakness and imperfection that I truly need Him. And He is the only source of strength that never runs out. Every day I start by spending time praying, reading the Bible, and listening for God's guidance. Those moments are not just a religious duty, but a time when I truly connect with the one who saved my life. I learned to open my heart, to let Him guide my every step, whether in joy or in difficulty. My new life is not always easy. There are times when I still feel tired and discouraged, but instead of giving up, I find comfort in the promise that He will always be by my side, never abandoning me. I remember the Bible verse, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Living in grace means not having to carry every challenge by myself, but knowing how to entrust them to Him. I learned patience, how to forgive myself and others, and to live with a grateful heart. In the days that followed, I felt more clearly every step of my faith journey. Not a perfect journey, but one full of hope and the loving presence of God in every moment. On the journey of walking in grace, I realized a profound truth. Forgiveness is not just a gift we give to others, but also a way to free ourselves from the burdens of the past. Before, I carried a lot of pain and resentment towards myself, towards those who had hurt me, and towards the unfair circumstances I had to go through. Those negative emotions were like invisible chains, increasingly trapping my soul and preventing me from living fully. I used to think forgiveness was too difficult, that it meant giving up my right to justice and vindication. But when I looked into God's light, I was invited to look deep into my heart and place my trust that He could heal all wounds. With His help, I began to practice forgiveness, not just for others, but first and foremost for myself. I realized that my mistakes and stumbles didn't define me, but were opportunities for me to learn and grow. Forgiveness opened a new door for me, where I was no longer bound by a painful past. My soul became lighter, freer. I felt a clear, overwhelming peace, like a cool stream flowing through the darkest corners of my heart. Day by day, I learned to live with an open heart, without resentment, without judgment, but full of compassion and understanding, the very things I received from God's love. Forgiveness not only saved me, but also transformed me into a new person, someone who lives in freedom, hope, and His light. After the months I spent in darkness, when I was healed both physically and in my soul, my life became completely different. I no longer looked at things with the same old eyes. eyes full of fear, doubt, and insecurity. Instead, I learned to cherish every present moment as the most precious gift I had ever received. Every morning I wake up, I no longer take it for granted. The sunlight seeping through the window, the chirping of birds, the gentle smell of coffee. It all feels like a delicate symphony that I never paid attention to before. I am grateful for every breath, every look, every warm hug from my loved ones. I spend more time with family and friends, no longer caught in the whirlwind of work or meaningless worries. I learned to slow down, to listen more, and to love more deeply. I also realized that I have a responsibility with this new life, not just to live for myself, but to be a witness to God's healing and love. I started participating in community activities, helping people who were struggling with difficulties, and sharing my story to inspire hope. Life is not always easy, but with God's light guiding me, I feel stronger and more at peace. I know that no matter what challenges lie ahead, I will never walk alone. After being healed, I realized that the most precious gift wasn't just life, but the light of hope I found in the darkness. I know that many people around me are also struggling with challenges, with deep pain, and I feel called to bring that light to them. I started joining patient support groups, people who were facing terminal illnesses or difficulties in life. I don't force anyone to believe what I believe, but I just share my true story, a story of despair, faith, and miraculous healing. Every time I retell that journey, I feel the power spreading. The eyes that were once dimmed by disappointment slowly light up with a spark of hope. I see that they are no longer alone in their battle, but have a companion, a God who loves them relentlessly. In addition to sharing my story, I also learned how to listen, truly listen to the pain and worries of others without judgment. I realized that sometimes what people need is not advice or answers, but just a sincere presence and love. The journey of bringing light to others not only helps them, but also strengthens my own faith and strength. I learned that the greatest joy doesn't come from receiving, but from giving. My life has become more meaningful than ever before, as I can be an instrument for God to do wonderful things in the lives of others. And I know this journey has only just begun. My journey from darkness to light is not just a personal story, but a living testament to God's constant presence and power in every person's life. No matter what difficulties and challenges I went through, He was always there, never leaving, never extinguishing the light of hope. I once stood on the brink of despair, feeling like every door was closed, but it was in those moments that His light shone through, dispelling the darkness, bringing new life and unwavering faith. That light was not just a one-time miracle, but a flame that burns forever in my soul, guiding me and keeping me steady every day. I know that not everyone has a story like mine, but I firmly believe that He is still at work, healing, comforting, and transforming the lives of so many people. His light never goes out as long as we open our hearts and believe. And this is an invitation for you. No matter where you are, no matter what your circumstances, let that light shine into your life. Believe that miracles still happen, hope still exists, and His love still surrounds you every day. That light is waiting for you to transform you and give you true life. My journey from darkness to light is not just my own story, but a testament to God's boundless love and power. When it seemed like there was no way out, He opened a new door, a door that led me to life, peace, and hope that I had never known. I learned that in life, no matter how many challenges there are, no matter how many times we fall, His light is always waiting, never going out. That light not only dispels the outer darkness, but also warms the soul, healing the deepest wounds in every heart. I am writing this story with all my gratitude and a desire to pass on hope to those who are lost. If you are reading these lines and feel a heavy heart, please remember that you are not alone. There is a God who always loves you and is ready to walk with you, no matter what the road ahead holds. Open your heart to receive that light so that the miracle can begin in your life today. If you are feeling lost, lonely, or desperate as I once was, know that you are not alone. There is a light waiting for you to open the door, an unconditional love ready to heal and support you. Take a moment to listen to the call in your heart. Try to pray, even if it's just a short sentence, and let Him into your life. You can start with a simple prayer. God, if you are real, please help me. Don't hesitate to seek out faith communities where you can be loved and supported on your journey to find new hope and life. Remember, a miracle can happen today, right now. Don't wait any longer. Open your heart to receive His light and step into a life full of meaning and peace. You are not alone. He is always there, and He loves you. You might be the one to plant a seed of salvation in their heart today.